Anyway, we've got one more presentation before the lunch breaks. That's epic. So you can take as long as you like, I guess, although that look that I just got was not the right thing for me to say. The next presentation is through Zoom. So that's the other thing we need to suss out if Rose Reed is already on Zoom. Oh, she's already there. Wow, this is incredible. This presentation's titled How Local Government Can Improve Access to Product Stewardship Schemes. It's by Rose Reed, who's the director of the UTS Institute of Sustainable Futures, Product Stewardship Centre of Excellence. And Rose, can you hear me okay on Zoom?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you absolutely fine. Now, do you want a presentation put up while you're doing this?
Yeah, it might be better if you run it from there rather than me running it from home, just so that only because of the internet access. But yeah, I'm happy either way. I can do that.
Great.
That's
Alice,
fine.
have you got a presentation there for this one?
Did she get it or not? If not, I have emailed it through, but only earlier today. It's looking very warm up there.
Super warm.
I'm very jealous.
Where are you at the moment?
Oh, I'm in the Southern Highlands, and it's about 8 degrees and windy. You guys wouldn't.
8 degrees and windy. Maybe some of our Alice Springs people know what that feels like, but anyone who's in the top end hasn't experienced that in a long time. We put jumpers on when it's 21 degrees here.
Yeah, I know. I love it. You do great beanies up there, though. Well, Alice Springs does. I know that.
Alice Springs does the great beanies. When is Beanie Festival this year? Anyone from Alice here to?
Soon. Must be soon.
Or has it happened already? I'm asking the wrong people. It's not happened yet. Okay, cool. All right. We need to find the people that are doing events and arts from council as opposed to waste management for that question.
Yeah, sure.
I'll find out for you, Rose, and I'll let you know. We're just getting your presentation sorted so that we can run both at the same time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Easy.
I'll try it. I'm not going to know if I'm going to be quite as short as the others, but I'll try and keep it quite succinct.
No, you're all good. I'm teasing everybody because it's a Friday and I've relaxed a little bit, so you don't have to listen to me. I just like stirring people up. What's your plans for the weekend, Rose?
Oh, riding horses, no doubt. That's what I tend to do. Riding horses, collecting wood. I think they'll be my main activities this weekend. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good answer. That was, at least it wasn't, you could have been going to like fancy coffee stores or things like that. That's much more relatable for the people in this room, I think.
No. Being outside, even when it's cold and windy, is lots more fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Anyone else in the room got an exciting weekend plan that we can share with Rose? I'm hosting the supercars, so that's a real contrast to this room, I can tell you.
It's very hectic up there, isn't it? There's lots happening, I know.
Very hectic. Dry season, everyone's got everything going on. So I'm going to be hanging out with a bunch of people that are making bad life choices and encouraging them to do dumb things on camera. That's my weekend plans. I actually can't wait. It's going to be so good. We're going to have a competition to see who can make the best car sound effect noises.
Yes, I can see the presentation.
It looks like your presentation's up, Rose.
Oh, yeah.
So I will, I'll get everyone's attention for you and I'll hand over to you. So,
sure.
Friends at the Waste Management Symposium, if I can have your attention, we're about to throw over to Rose, who's in the Highlands, currently experiencing 8-degree temperatures. So we'll try and share a little bit of our tropical goodness with her. If you wouldn't mind putting your hands together and making Rose Reed very welcome for her presentation.
Oh, thanks everyone. And firstly, I'd like to acknowledge both the Larrakia people, your traditional owners of the land where you are, and also the Gundungurra people who are the traditional owners where I am. And pay respects to elders past, present and future. I'll try and keep the presentation quite sharp for you. So if you have any questions, we can go through that. But really want to give you a bit of a rundown. If we go to the next slide, please. A little bit about what is the Product Stewardship Centre of Excellence, what product stewardship is and what it means, and Deepka made some really valid points about where should we be focusing, and perhaps up and avoiding waste is a really important part to focus on, especially in regional remote areas where collecting and recycling is very challenging. And then also look at, local councils and product stewardship schemes, how do they interact, and also how the centre can help you guys in both, getting understanding and learning more from you, and also how we can help engage with your communities and homelands for more. So next slide, please. The Centre of Excellence was launched in March 2012 down in Parliament House in Canberra. And the centre has been formed in response to the government's call in late 2020 to establish this centre. The federal government has really stepped up in supporting product stewardship and ensuring product stewardship becomes mainstream in business models across Australia. And as a result, they called for expressions of interest for organisations to host and establish a Centre of Excellence. And that's our little merry team there with Minister Lee and Evans in the centre, along with my colleagues. So we'll just go to the next slide just to explain who's involved in the centre. So the centre is actually a consortium of 3 organisations. We've got the University of Technology Sydney, where I'm an adjunct professor with the Institute for Sustainable Futures. We've also got the AI, the Australian Industry Group, involved, and really important because product stewardship is all about the producers and businesses stepping up and taking their responsibilities for the life cycle of their product, from design through manufacture, use, reuse, and final disposal. We also have Coccinal Communications, who is out there to help us market and promote and engage with businesses, state, local governments, and other players involved, charity groups, social enterprises, recyclers, service providers, logistics operators, and so on. So we do have a broad team. We also have a group of specialist advisors who have experience from governance, logistics, all sorts of technologies, and so on. So all sorts of different experience and knowledge. So if we go to the next slide again. As I mentioned, the real mission of the centre is really about accelerating the uptake of product stewardship in Australia by businesses. It's about mentoring, educating, and activating the players in product stewardship, whether that's businesses, local councils play a key role, state governments, and also other enterprises and service providers. We want to see a wide scale of adoption of product and material stewardship in business models. And it's really about reducing waste, avoiding waste, reducing the environmental impacts, and driving greater recovery of materials once they're finished their useful life. So if we go over to the next slide, please. So what is product stewardship? And you guys have some really good examples of product stewardship in the territory operating there. The cash for cans, the container deposit scheme is a great example, where there is a system in place. The beverage companies are paying for those deposits to drive incentives to recover and collect and process the beverage containers being put onto the market in the Northern Territory. But product stewardship is not just about the disposal life. It's about looking at how you can reduce those impacts of that product throughout its life cycle, both the environmental and health. And why? Because, we don't want to litter our country. We don't want to pollute our waterways. We don't want to destroy our habitats. Plus, it also places a big cost burden on, communities and local governments. And so what's important is, where is product stewardship targeted to? It's the manufacturers. It's the people who make and sell and put those products into the market. It's about them taking responsibility, because in reality, they have the greatest capacity to influence and change how products are made, how they're distributed, and putting in place systems so that you and I, the people who use these, can actually do the right thing with those products to extend their life, to keep them in use, and to also ensure that they're disposed of properly. And it really is about those external costs that local councils and communities and the environment have had to bear are being transferred back to the producers and to the users into the price of those products. There's different ways of talking about product stewardship. Some people say product stewardship, some people say extended producer responsibility, product take back, and so on. So it comes in different forms, but when it comes down to it, it really is about those companies who are putting those products onto the market, are taking responsibility for and reducing their impacts throughout their life cycle. So if we go to the next slide, just to sort of elaborate a little bit more on that, product stewardship is about designing better products. And coming back to Deepka's comments earlier, how can we make products last longer? How can we reduce the amount of waste in the first place? How can we eliminate litter? How can we make them easier to repair? How can we make them more reusable or be repurposed for other things? So that's a really big area. Another big area is in manufacturing. What are the materials that we're using? Are we using renewable materials? Are we using materials recovered from products used previously? There's a lot of options there that can be looked at. And these are all product stewardship activities. The other one is also, how can we help users maintain their products and keep them in active use rather than single use? How can we repair them, repurpose them, and share them across the community? So there's a whole variety of those. And then finally, disposal, which is probably what most people are experienced with in terms of product stewardship, is how do we collect those products once they're finished their useful life? How do we recover those materials and keep them in the economy? So there's different phases of product stewardship and elements of product stewardship. So if we go to the next slide, please. So what does product stewardship look like in Australia? There's two elements. Sometimes product stewardship is governed by state or national regulations. So, and product stewardship has been in place since the late 1990s and has been really focused on addressing pollution or waste or litter issues generated by products and packaging. So we've had things like ozone protection and synthetic greenhouse gas management, which has resulted in the creation of refrigerant reclaim, which is about dealing with gases out of refrigeration units. We've had the National Environment Protection Measure, which is why we have the Packaging Covenant, which has been in operation for a very long time. And we've also seen the Product Stewardship Act come into play in 2011 and the creation of the National Television and Computer Recycling Scheme. And so some of you would be familiar with Tech Collect or eCycle or EPSA, where they've come out and helped run collection, facilitated and funded collection events for TVs and computers. And more recently, we've had that Product Stewardship Act has been updated with the Recycling and Waste Reduction Act of 2020, which enables and encourages the accreditation of voluntary initiatives. We also have state government regulations. And as I mentioned, the state contained deposit schemes are a really good example of product stewardship regulated at a state level. And you guys are very familiar with the Northern Territory one. Nearly every state and territory has one now. We're looking at Victoria and Tasmania bringing theirs on in the next year or two. And what's great about this is this scheme has incentives that changes behaviour, reduces litter, increases recovery, creates jobs and opportunities, and has a lot of social and community benefits. So product stewardship has many pluses. So if we move to the next slide, please. So we also have, just to outline a bit about what's happening out there in other product stewardship in Australia. So there's voluntary ones. And so these initiatives are driven by individual businesses or a collective of organisations and businesses to address a particular issue. And I've grouped them into three there, you'll see on the slide. So we have government accredited schemes. So these are schemes that have been developed by an industry group who have put forward a detailed plan of what they're going to aim for in terms of addressing the issue. So in the case of mobile muster, it's about recovering and recycling mobile phones, batteries and their accessories. Many of you would be familiar with that. I know that the territory councils and stores and communities have been quite actively working in collaboration with mobile muster, so it's great to see. There's also Tyre Stewardship Australia, which I believe presented yesterday, and Big Bag Recovery. But those last two are only recently accredited, and they're addressing different aspects. Big Bag Recovery is about those big agricultural bulker bags and recovering those from various locations around Australia and recovering those plastics and creating new products out of those plastics. Each of those three formally have the government accredited stamp of approval. And from a local council perspective, this is something you should be asking any of those producers or product stewardship schemes that come to you to ask you to work with them, is ask them, are they accredited? Do they plan to be accredited? Because that gives you greater confidence that you know you'll be working with a group of companies or an individual organisation that has got good rigour, finances and governance around their systems. And you can have confidence that if they are recycling the materials, they are being recycled properly, and they should also be able to report and provide information to you. There's other collective schemes you would be familiar with, perhaps, such as Drummuster in particular, ChemClear. They've been around for a long time. Paintback, cartridges for Planet Ark. Soft Landing is a mattress, well, it's now called Mattress, the Australian Bedding Recycling Scheme. And also soft plastics recycling in major supermarkets and in the cities, I would imagine. I'm not too sure how extensive that is in more regional areas within the territory. But you also have lots of individual businesses that are doing various initiatives. And they can be like Aldi offers battery recycling, Patagonia does repair and reuse and recycling of clothing, Nike has a reuse a shoe program, there's carpets, there's Canon has a camera sharing platform, so you can share cameras. IKEA and Chevello is a commercial furniture one. So product stewardship has existed in and does exist in various forms and various scales across Australia, run by individual businesses or collective groups. So if we go to the next slide, please. And as part of the federal government's initiative to drive and increase uptake of product stewardship by businesses, the federal government put out a round of funding, the National Product Stewardship Investment Fund, last year, and have invested nearly up to $20 million in a raft of 15 or 16 projects to develop and implement schemes. And I just wanted to show, this slide gives you a list of the types of products that schemes are either about to launch or in development. And, if there are any of these areas, you should reach out to these companies if you're interested in looking at these are products that are challenges for your councils, then, look to reach out to those. So we have, batteries, which will be a fantastic scheme and looks to be launched by early January next year. There's tyres, mining tyres, plastic ore containers. Mobile Muster's looking to extend the scope of the products they're going to collect. So taking in things like modems, various TV accessories and so on. From an agricultural perspective, there's silage, wrap, ag plastics, polypropylene plant packaging, so that may be relevant to some of the regions within the territory. There's also a variety of other packaging areas such as plastic packaging, and I believe Peter Brisbane was there yesterday from the Australian Packaging Covenant, various coffee cup and coffee capsule programs, but also importantly a compostable packaging program. So looking at linking composters, commercial food outlets, and also local councils with the appropriate composting, but also using the appropriate compostable packaging in those systems. Other areas are mattresses and bedding, commercial furniture, childcare safety seats. So we looked at that, should be launched later this year, which is very exciting. Also moving into textiles, clothing is a big issue. And not just necessarily for recycling, but also for reuse and repurposing is a key priority there. There's also starting to move out into cosmetic products, medical absorption hygiene from, medical health sector, and then also sports equipment and sports footwear. So there's plenty out there that needs to be addressed. And these are all problem products that don't necessarily have a home to go to. So trying to extend their life, trying to increase the amount of recycled content in these products, trying to make sure they're more repairable, but then also making sure that they're collected and recycled and those materials recovered properly locally here in Australia. So then just next slide, please. So how does local government product stewardship scheme interact? And my experience is I used to run Mobile Muster and ran that for about 10 years. And then I also ran one of the TV and computer recycling schemes. So I've had a lot of practice, a lot of experience in reaching out to local governments. And my experience is in those schemes where they are take back, it is, local councils' role is never technically or legally defined, but the relationship normally works in a way where a council will help to host a collection or a repair point, or at least help promote a collection or repair points that a product stewardship scheme has set up in their region. Whereas the scheme, the product stewardship scheme, is an organised. It should be providing and putting in place, the necessary collection infrastructure, or repair infrastructure, or provide the necessary training and support for local people that are helping facilitate that collection or repair. They should also be providing marketing and promotional support, both in mainstream advertising, but also materials. Where there's transport and logistics, they should be covering the costs for that. And then also covering the cost through recycling, but also importantly, sharing information back with the local government about what has been achieved in partnership with the council. And I think what's really important from the experience I've learned is that there needs to be a strong, where it works really well, where a local council and a product stewardship scheme benefit both, is when a collaborative partnership approach is taken, rather than a simple contracting services out, where a local council might put something out to tender and a product stewardship scheme might submit for that tender. What I think in those situations, it's a very minimum cost service-based thing, and you don't necessarily realise the real benefits of product stewardship. So I think taking collaborative approach, where the product stewardship scheme listens and works very closely with local council and tailors the solutions for that area. And local council contributes where it makes sense, but also is not burdened with any unnecessary costs. And the benefits are substantial. It can reduce cost to council, and it can actually provide a service that councils couldn't afford to provide. It can increase the amount of materials that a council can, or number of points or service points that council can provide with the support of the product stewardship scheme. And similarly, it can provide employment opportunities or even social opportunities, as illustrated by the container deposit schemes in particular. I think also it's really important that the majority, and actually most product stewardship schemes, are a not-for-profit basis and are really looking to pay a fair and reasonable price for services a council might supply, but also to only do that on a cost recovery basis. And so I think it's, what's really important is this partnership needs to be fair and reasonable on both parties. And it is really much a partnership. And so I'd be interested to, hear other people's experiences. I know there's been all sorts of challenges, given distances, timing, weather, climate, and all the unique features of the territory. So anyway, that's sort of how, what's important in terms of local government and product stewardships working together. But I think, those benefits, it can really, these schemes can help local councils provide more services and engage the community in a whole range of activities to become more sustainable. And it doesn't have to be collection, it can be repair, it can be reuse, it can be repurposing. There's a huge number of opportunities, and, the scheme should be there to invest and work with the councils on innovative projects like that as well. So next slide, please. So I'll just quickly give a quick rundown of the basic programs and services the Centre of Excellence is providing. So next slide again. We have 5 basic programs. One of those is professional development and training for people, people within businesses, but also local councils, state governments, and so on, helping people learn and understand product stewardship and the elements to make a scheme and initiative successful. We also have a free mentoring service where we help emerging and priority schemes and businesses to help them develop their schemes and get them implementing and improving the efficiency of those. And that includes facilitating and introducing them to appropriate collaborators and so on. We also have a product stewardship network that we're just launching in the next month. And that really is about bringing those people implementing schemes or participating in schemes together, including local councils. So we'd be very keen to see local councils join. So there is an ability to network and share information with all of those people within the supply chain that can help you deal with issues in your region. We also will have an excellence and awards program, and that's really about creating a whole lot of acknowledging great achievements, but to encourage and enthuse other people to move on. We'll also do a product stewardship index, which is looking at how product stewardship is being effective and what the benefits are providing. And that will be an ongoing annual process that will look to feed into and inform the federal government's ministers' priority list for products that may be considered for regulation in the future. Now just two more slides and we're done. So just next slide, please. So a series of resources that we're in the process of producing. So looking at some very simple best practice notes on how to do different elements of running a product stewardship scheme, including, and so we've looked to work with local councils on what are the best ways to form partnerships with local councils, white papers that explore challenging issues such as product stewardship in remote and regional areas, case studies, we're once again showcasing and highlighting and recognising achievements, and trying to develop some basic tools to help businesses to understand how they are tracking in their product stewardship approaches. Next slide, please. The centre also has a small research and advisory services where we have a broad team who can help and assist individual product stewardship schemes deal with particular issues in development and implementation. So then we move on to the last slide. Thank you. So looking ahead, really want to hear from local councils. We're trying to get out and meet with local councils and associations to find out what are the needs, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities they're having from a product stewardship perspective. Really want to encourage you all. We have an e-newsletter that comes out every couple of months that's got some useful information there. Plus, really would like to see local councils joining our product stewardship network. It's free and a great forum to engage with producers and businesses who are dealing with a whole variety of products. And also, I said, come to our next webinar. We've actually just had yesterday had our second webinar on voluntary accreditation or accreditation of voluntary schemes. So then final slide. Thank you very much, everyone. Oh yeah, we can go to the next slide if you like. So there's our contact details. So please follow us on Twitter or join our LinkedIn page. Email us if you have any queries or questions. And there's our website, and we're gradually adding more information to it. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks very much, Rose. Were there any questions from in the room? Yes, there's one. Hold on a second. I'll just walk the microphone along.
Hey, Rose. Rebecca from Walga here.
Hey, Rebecca.
The weather is lovely. You're missing out. All right, I've got two questions, if it's all right. Does the Institute, or will it, set a minimum standard for product stewardship? Because at the moment, we've got a voluntary accredited scheme in TSA, which isn't paying for the cost of recycling. And we've got a voluntary unaccredited scheme with Paintback that is paying for the cost of recycling. So without some form of minimum standard, we just get all of these schemes and they don't necessarily help. First question.
A really great question, and trying to, and that's where the Centre of Excellence is. And so we're, as opposed to set minimum standard, I think it's really about driving people to what is best practice is what we want to focus on. And so, and part of that will drive through the voluntary accreditation process. I think by, accredited schemes will have to meet, be performing to a certain level and being able to report on an annual basis as to how they're performing and explaining why they're not achieving their goals and that sort of thing. So the accreditation process should give councils more confidence. Your point about TSA and Paintback illustrates the difference that product stewardship schemes aren't necessarily all about collection and recycling. Paintback is about collection and recycling, whereas Tyre Stewardship, there is already the collection and recycling, and I appreciate in the Northern Territory it's different, but in a lot of the other states and territories, if I go and get my tyres replaced, I pay a $35 disposal fee, which covers the cost for that to be recycled properly. That includes collection and recycling. And so TSA's role there has to be to certify and ensure that that whole process of collection and recycling is done to standard. So it's a slightly different approach, but there's so I think that's the important thing to understand about the product stewardship schemes, is some focus on different elements of the cycle. And the other key thing is that product stewardship is that the Tyre stewardship one is about trying to drive markets, which it hasn't, it has been slow to do that, to create markets, to bring a pull through so that, you know, there is an incentive for people to go and collect and recycle tyres. Tyre stewardship, Australia has received funding under the grant program to do mining tyres and to start looking at how they can recover that. So, but within the territory, I don't believe there is any fees charged to people when they replace tyres, and also appreciate how tyres move around in the territory is different. So perhaps there is a need to come up. Tyre Stewardship Australia needs to come up with a different solution for there and look to start funding the collection and recycling in those regional remote areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And that would be our starting point, that they need to fund the recycling and collection in remote areas like Western Australia and Northern Territory, and probably large chunks of Queensland. Second part of the question. So the government's just approved and given money to a lot of different organisations to come up with product stewardship schemes. So it's great you're doing best practice approaches. What role do you think the Institute has in kind of corralling this together so that it's easy for the community and local government to engage? Because you're going to have 25 plus product stewardship schemes, so local governments are going to have to engage with every single one, and the community's going to have to engage with every single one, and it's just going to get really messy.
Yeah, and it is challenging, and this is where the Product Stewardship Network really needs to step up and come into play. We're hoping where we can bring together and try and find, in terms of, say, you know, there was a slide earlier on where I listed all of the different new ones that are happening. Like there's a lot happening in agricultural plastics. So how can they look at streamlining collection and logistics and interacting with those communities using those products? So yes, in the answer, recognise that is something we need to face, to address. And that's why I want local councils to get involved in the Product Stewardship Network so that we can link up the right people so that when they do start to roll out, they're engaging, before they're rolling out, while they're designing the projects, they're engaging with local government representatives to really understand how we can design those schemes so we don't have that problem of 10 million people coming to talk to council about different ways of collecting stuff. But I think actually, Rebecca, one of the other things I think is quite interesting is local councils starting to look at seeing what's on the table now and saying, well, okay, if we, you know, what are the services and the offerings that we can put on the table to these schemes, and I'd be keen to work with local government associations and councils about trying to develop a bit of a proposal that we can put it back out to these schemes to saying, well, these are the types of things that can be offered. You know, we have a lot of good assets. You know, we have places where we can house things. We've got people that can reach out to the community. You know, we can help facilitate that stuff. So let's try and work together on developing the best solution.
Chris Smith from Tiwi Islands. We had someone come along here and talk about the recycling of tyres, and we're talking about the stewardship of tyres. And it seems that 70% of the tyres that are recycled are made into tyre-derived fuel, which are then burned in concrete factories in Asia, drying concrete. Yep. Like, if that's all we're doing, then we're not addressing the root problems at all. Where a Western country shipping out our rubbish again to a third world country, to an Asian country, where it's then burnt in an incinerator that probably wouldn't be allowed here. So we're not, while there's a stewardship program, we're not really addressing any problems. We're just trying to clean up our own backyard to a certain extent, getting rid of the tyre.
Yeah, sure. And a really good question, Chris. A couple of things there. The tyres are also used in the cement facilities here in Australia. They use it in Adelaide and also maybe in Berrima, which literally down the road from my place, I have a cement factory down the road. But you're right, it's not the best solution. And this is where Tyre Stewardship was one of the key things, was to create more markets and new markets locally. And that was their investment fund. So that needs to be ramped up more. The only other upside is the export ban for tyres comes into play on the 1st of December. So so there was a whole lot of bale product that was going offshore and will stop from the 1st of December. And there has to be a more refined product fuel, and the specifications for the fuel have to be of a higher standard, so that we're not dumping our waste offshore. We are providing a fuel base. But the solution really is about creating new markets back here and locally, and keeping these tyres in the country and coming up with better solutions that way.
Hi Rose, it's Clinton Habner from Tyre Recycling. I'd just like to respond to that. You're right. The true definition of a product stewardship scheme is for the manufacturer of the product to be responsible for it and have some extended producer responsibility. I get that, but it's a misconception to assume that tyres are being burnt in an incinerator overseas, and it's not done in this country. The fuel is a replacement for fossil fuels. Now, Australia make a lot of fossil fuels and don't have a huge problem with exporting that overseas. This replaces that in countries that don't have the ability to get access to that material at the right sort of level. So it's not burning it in your backyard to atmosphere. And I think that chain of custody responsibilities on businesses such as ours and that Tyre Stewardship are putting in place with their international audits is taking care of that from a Western world perspective. So, and the Australian businesses, Tyre Stewardship Australia is purely geared around generating new markets here in Australia. But that is so far short of the volume, because we are a very small country with very, very small demands in these areas and very high-end expectations. So the realities around it is that we can't do it instantly. And as I said yesterday, better, not best. And we have to get ourselves there. It's better for us to provide these alternate fuels and to just to not do anything with them. So thanks.
Yeah, and energy recovery is a very legitimate use of materials that can't be reused. There is a point where a certain material can no longer be reused. So where energy recovery can be done in a safe way, and there's plenty of technologies out there that are very safe in terms of energy recovery. So yeah, rather than it stockpiling or being strewn, better than having tyres strewn across the landscape.
Were there any other questions from the room? No? In which case, can we please thank Rose for that presentation? Have a lovely weekend, Rose, of horse riding and wood chopping.
Yeah, thank you. You have a great weekend, everyone. See you later.
All right, bye. Right, we've hit lunchtime, legends. So we're going to have a lunch break. We've actually made a bit of time back from the schedule. So if everyone's happy, we'll have a lunch break now and return here at 1 o'clock and maybe shuffle everything forward a tiny bit for an early Friday knockoff, which I think is always a good goal to have at a conference. So 1 o'clock back here. Our lunch today is at the Mercure Resort. So it's actually the one across the road with the fancy pool to sit by for lunch. So we're all going to kind of shuffle our way across the road, looking both ways before we cross. And then we're going to go have lunch at the Mercure Resort and then return here at 1 o'clock. A reminder, if you do have to leave in the afternoon, please make sure you do your feedback forms before you go. They're all on the tables in front of you. But otherwise, back in here at 1 o'clock, lunch at the Mercure Resort. Maybe Meredith, do you want to lead everybody across that way? Watch out for Meredith in the blue. She is your Pied Piper towards lunch. Just at the Mercure Resort. Back here 1 o'clock, and feedback forms, if you need to do them early, do them. That'd be great. Otherwise, we'll see you at 1 o'clock. Thanks, guys.